Hello, Grace Community Church, and welcome back to our cover-to-cover Bible reading plan. Today we are looking at Joshua 10 through 12, verse 6. Now, there are only a few things that I want to draw your attention to today. The first is, why does Joshua respond so quickly to the call of the Gibeonites who deceived him? Like, God had called Joshua to cleanse the land, to drive out the Canaanites that lived there. And yet these Gibeonites deceived Joshua and the Israelites. And yet Joshua comes so quickly to their aid and marches overnight 20, 30 miles to come and help them against these 5 city-state rulers. Now, the reason I bring this up is because this shows God's grace. Right? Some people will look at Joshua and say, why does God command genocide to happen? Well, that's not what God is commanding. He's commanding a cleansing of the land. And we know that the Canaanites have defiled the land with horrible, disgusting practices. And as I said yesterday, if these same practices were happening in the world today, we would be absolutely disgusted and say, why aren't we doing something about that as our country or any country? Why are we standing by while these things are happening? But because the Gibeonites came to God and wanted to do everything they could to make sure that they were in the good graces of Israel, God is with them. And we see that same thing with Rahab as well. She recognized that God was with Israel and she helped them. And so these people are saved not because they aren't Canaanites, but because they turn to God. And so that's what we see in this section, is that there is a religious cleansing that needs to take place of the land. And this is part of God's justice, but he is gracious as well, and he gives grace to those who turn to him. So that's the first thing I wanted to point out to you. The second thing is this strange prayer that Joshua prays, that the sun would stand still in this area, and another area the moon would stand still. Now, there's a question is, how does this happen if it's a whole day where the sun stands still and the moon stands still? Then that violates all these laws of physics, and so people really look at this and say, well, this obviously couldn't have happened. Now, there are many ways that God can, use his creation to do something good. In fact, it says this is a time when God listened to a mere human. So God did something miraculous in this prayer that Joshua prays. But as you see in the text, it's separated into more of a poetic line. Now, that can tell us a few things. One, because that word, the verb there, to stand still, could also mean to be quiet, meaning that the sun is not as hot that day. So please block the sun from zapping the energy from our people so that we can bring a defeat upon the land. But also, it could be anything else. It could be the most miraculous thing that ever happened, and that God used the physical world to do something that no one's ever seen, because God can do that and he can make things happen. Now, we don't know exactly what happened, but we do know that God is able to do what God is able to do. Now, the other thing I want to mention is verse 27 through verse 27 for chapter 10, is that when the sun went down, Joshua gave instructions from the bodies of the kings to be taken down. Now, that is a direct reflection back on Deuteronomy 21. And then he covers the opening of the cave with a pile of large rocks after he kills these kings. And that is, again, it says it remains there for the day. That's another memorial that they can look back on, as we talked about yesterday. Setting up a memorial to look back on how God has delivered them. And throughout these battles, what we see is that God is actually taking an active role in the destruction of the people there. The Israelites didn't knock the wall down. God did. The Israelites didn't send hail down on the kings. God did. And so we see that God is taking an active role in this, and Israel has to also be active within it. So as Christians, what we can see here is that obedience, full obedience, brings full victory. That's what we see through Joshua and Israel, and that's what we see God doing the miraculous things through the obedience of Joshua. So those are some of the questions that you might face reading this, but we can see the grace of God and the power of God through the obedience of His people. Hope you enjoy this reading. God bless you.